Welcome to the Define Tomorrow podcast, ladies and gentlemen. This podcast is aimed at IT administrators, anyone really working in IT, and we aim to help kind of distill the information that's important to you. Today's podcast is all around 2023. What is your strategy? What to look forward to? And I don't want to say our predictions, but what are our thoughts that we would like to see from the major vendors that we work with on a daily basis? I'd like to introduce my co-host to the podcast first of all. Kam Panasar.
Hello.
And Oli Restorick.
Hello.
And Anthony Charman.
Hello.
Thank you very much all for joining me. Can we just do a very brief round the room? What's your day job? What are you focusing on a little bit? Because that will just give everyone a flavour as we go through the podcast as to maybe some of the subjects to expect to hear from you. So, Kam, your brief introduction.
Yep, so I'm an enterprise architect here at Computer World, and my focus is on infrastructure, although it's regarded some of it as heritage now, but also sort of spreading out into the cloud version of it with Azure, and all that brings as well to the table.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kam. Oli.
Yeah, I'm Oli. I work as a technical architect at Computer World. My day job really is talking about Microsoft 365 to our customers. That's primarily where it is. There's obviously a lot of the heritage stuff that Kam alluded to, the on-prem stuff, which is not going away, but there's less and less focus on that. And it's more about bridging from that on-prem world up into the cloud.
Fantastic. Thank you, Oli. And Anthony.
So I work alongside Oli as a business consultant. So whereas Oli's looking at very much the technical aspects of Microsoft, the Microsoft technologies, I'm looking at how they can be implemented to improve the efficiency of your organization. So come up from a completely different angle to Oli.
Fantastic. Well, thank you ever so much for joining me. I'm a little bit of a generalist. I touch most of the technology, so I look forward to getting involved in the conversation and kind of thinking a little bit as to where these technologies could be taking people in 2023 and beyond. But to get us started, let's pose the question that you are sat with one of the listeners to the Define Tomorrow podcast, and each of you have the opportunity to just give them one thing to be making sure they're looking into on 2023. Maybe some of the listeners have already done it. Maybe some of the listeners are looking to what should be included in their strategy. So Kam, what is your one thing for, let's call it the IT manager's strategy for 2023?
I think from my perspective, security is still a very strong thing to be considering in 2023. The sort of ransomware and cybercrime type things are not diminishing in any kind of way. So focusing on having that strong security posture and improving it as the year goes through, and trying to do some of those simple things which make things a bit more secure in the environment is probably a key focus area still.
Definitely, I think it's really important, and I think security is often overly complicated, and that means that people don't actually make advancements because they're kind of a little bit confused or a bit daunted on how to do that, really, aren't they?
Yes.
Oli, so what's your one strategy for IT manager in 23?
Yeah, so you've asked for one strategy. I'm going to keep banging the drum. Multi-factor authentication. If you haven't turned that on for all your users, do that. However, my main point is continue adopting Autopilot and Intune for modern management in the cloud. So a lot of people are still using those management technologies, Active Directory, group policy, that have been around for decades and really don't reflect the modern world. So get on board with these, start using them, and start doing some of the things that you just can't do with on-prem software.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. The world's changed a lot, changed quicker than we anticipated, and I don't think people have fully played catch up. I think there's a lot of people saying that they're doing Intune, but actually, what does that mean? Maybe they're registering the devices in there, but they've not done that next stage and really kind of turned it into the single point of management and experience-driven management tool that it can be. Anthony, what's your one strategy?
So my one bit of advice to IT managers is just take a look at what you're paying for within your Microsoft licensing. There are kind of 15, 20 applications that are available to you through the Microsoft licensing SKUs that you're using. And many of those you probably aren't using. Look at things like shifts and bookings and maybe even forms, and just think about how you can apply those to your business and make use of them. At the end of the day, you're paying for those already. So have a look and see how you can get some advantage from the money you're paying for those.
Fantastic. So I think between the three of you, we've had security, management, and optimization. I think I'm going to take sort of connection with the business as my one strategy. I think IT departments are getting better at this. I think there's been a lot of change during the last 3 years. So what I would urge IT departments and anyone managing an IT team is to make sure that you're looking at how you're connecting with the business. How is IT serving the business? I think we are going to get to the point very soon where lots of the cloud technologies that have been deployed have maybe got a bit out of control. They're a bit unruly and they're causing as many problems as they are benefits. So I think it kind of goes on to how can you get more benefits out of the platforms that you are utilizing, whether it's you're able to automate a process, whether it's actually you need to review an adoption strategy or something like that. I think that's my main thing. It's the connection with the business, and I think it layers on really well with the elements you've mentioned around security, around management, and around optimizing the environment. Is there anything else before we segue to that? Is there a best of the rest? I mean, what do you see people that are doing? Who wants to go first? I mean, is there, what kind of things do you see people looking at the moment?
I mean, to sort of echo some of that sentiment, I think the sort of IT world is merging with the business world, because IT services are becoming so simple to consume. So when we see things like ChatGPT and things like that, where basically you as a non-technical user can do quite a lot of things, and Power Apps and Power Automate and all these sorts of things. So that sort of overlap now between what is traditional IT and what is business is really overlapping now quite a lot. So there does need to be that sort of conversation between the two entities to make sure basically everyone's heading on that same journey. So I think it is quite important to define that and work together, really.
I think security is something that overlays every strategy, and Ollie, you obviously mentioned sort of that Intune and autopilot, but all of that's kind of interlinked with security as well, really, as well as the greater things that people forget to do. You mentioned MFA to begin with, so security and everything is important, really, isn't it?
Absolutely, totally.
Anthony, I mean, what else are you seeing from that kind of business management perspective, and what are people focusing on that is being driven by the business?
I'll get in trouble for this because I say it all the time, but what I see when I'm out with my clients is just that there's so many options and there's so many different ways of doing the same thing within the Microsoft suite that you can just create chaos if you don't actually draw out some rules as to how your organization is going to use the technologies available to you. And I'm thinking about things around your storage strategy. Most common question I get is, what should I use OneDrive for? Setting some rules about how people should be using OneDrive and communicating those to your users is really important. But also other areas, like I've got all these different ways of communicating. What should I use? When should I use chat? When should I use email? When should I be putting a post on a team? So it's just setting some rules up as how the organization should be using these different technologies, just to reduce the amount of chaos that you're creating.
Definitely. It certainly wouldn't be a podcast about Anthony without Captain Chaos making an appearance at some point, but never spoken a truer word. And there's lots of good technologies out there, things like Orchestree, or even just good management practices that are able to help you with those things. So let's get stuck right into the content now. Let's have a look at what we want to see coming, or what we may know is coming in 2023. And what we'll do is we'll do 2 rounds of this. So guys, make sure you save some of the stuff back for when I come back to you a second time. But Cam, where do you want to get us started? Obviously, you are focused on both the on-premises, as we refer to them a little bit, heritage technologies, and right up to say into Azure. So where are you going to take us first?
I think from where I see things at the moment, there's still that sort of hybrid journey in terms of what organizations are on at the moment. I think they got a bit punch drunk in terms of cloud first. There's no realization in terms of what the strategy should really be about that sort of infrastructure services, whether it has to be in your own data center or colo or in the cloud. So there's kind of a journey and a realignment there now that seems to be happening, and people are starting to re-examine, well, how should we use cloud? Where is it most effective? So it's not a carte blanche, just go and do whatever you want in cloud because you can. So I think there's definitely a focus on that and trying to leverage some of the sort of best of breed type products in the cloud solutions around things like the AI part or machine learning or the analytical part. So certainly you see that happening at the moment and growing in 2023. But I also think there's still a realization that the assets in your own data center still need to be given water and bread in terms of kept running. So there's a sort of realization that we can't just leave this behind. We have to do something about it, because I think quite a few organizations sort of took a pause on those infrastructure investments. So they're kind of doing those investments now in the data center, but sort of trying to question, does this need to be in our own management sphere, or do we actually use a cloud service to provide the same sort of service or application? So I think going forward, that's only going to sort of increase, but also trying to leverage some of these sort of non-coding type tools also means the sort of IT landscape is simplifying, and I think that will continue in 2023.
So let's break that down into a few bits. I think there's quite a few interesting parts there, and I think there's technologies already emerging. So I think with the data centers needing to be fed and watered, and I love that expression. You can imagine it's like much like my wife's plants. They come into the house beautiful, and a few months later I see them struggling for water in the corner of our kitchen or whichever room. We appear to have plants everywhere these days. But the hybrid cloud is becoming more of a thing now. I think it's a subject that has been discussed for a long period of time, but I'm seeing it starting to become easier to consume. So Cam, we've got things like Azure Stack HCI, or if you wanted to take an approach a little bit differently, you could use Azure Arc, or if you wanted to go with a different flavor or something like that, you've got VMware's offerings where you can put VMware in Azure. What do you think, or what do you hope we're going to see in 2023 around this kind of hybrid cloud? What does good look like at the end of that journey for you, do you think?
Yeah, I think it depends. I think everyone's definition of what good is varies in terms of the organizations, but certainly things like Arc are definitely heading in the right direction in terms of that control plane of trying to manage what you have in your own data center or in a cloud solution. And I think Microsoft are aware enough and savvy enough to know that they can't restrict it just their own ecosystem. So they have to be sort of all things to all men. And I think that sort of flexibility is certainly something that enterprises are needing and demanding at the moment, and simplifying their journey in terms of the whole overall management strategy. So off the infrastructure, and I think it's heading in the right direction. And things like Arc came into the picture with quite limited capability, shall we say, but what we can see is that capability is now evolving and developing to not just being VMs, for example. It's also thinking about containers and all that sort of thing, and integrating with a wide variety and ecosystem in terms of what sits behind that management plane.
I really quite like the look of Azure Arc. I think it's one of those things that I see a lot of potential. I have also equally a lot of frustration as to where it currently is today. I can't remember how Microsoft classifies. Is it a public preview or something like that? Ollie, I don't know if you remember the terminology.
I'm not sure the terminology, but yeah, that's one that they very commonly use.
It's kind of where it's gone past a private preview where they're only the few. Anyone could go and do it, but you're warned this isn't quite ready yet, but have a play with it. Not quite production ready.
Will be a public preview. Sure.
Yeah, and then you get there. So it's in this public preview phase, and I think we kind of wait for the latest version of vSphere to be supported by it, and then just as Microsoft support the latest version of it, VMware then released the new version, which then isn't supported by it. But I think the dream is, and this is what the dream promises to deliver, that you're able to go into Azure and you're able to see your resources irrespective where they are. Whether you have Azure Stack HCI on premises, whether you have a VMware infrastructure on premises, whether you have resources in a US West data center, a Europe East data center, whatever that is, and you can just consume those resources. And I think that's the ideal situation. And what, as you alluded to there, Cam and Ollie, you're probably seeing this more as well, is Microsoft are breaking down those barriers in terms of just being a Microsoft technology. And Ollie, you've always got a wonderful legacy in Microsoft, but Microsoft loving Linux certainly is something that never would have happened in the past, is it?
Absolutely. It was happened in a fairly short period of time. So, I mean, you go back to Steve Ballmer on that day, and he described Linux as being a cancer, which was completely different. And then a few years later, you go into Microsoft UK's headquarters and you see a Linux penguin sat on the reception desk. So yeah, it's quite a big shift around to actually embracing it and not just saying everyone should hate this thing.
Definitely, I like this new Microsoft. I think it's Satya Nadella that has encouraged and driven this, and certainly that's what I like to think. I've read his book, and he certainly seems someone that has that vision. But I like the fact that Microsoft is now being the technology that not is just in every vendor's infrastructure, whether that was back in the day, Citrix and VMware and Red Hat and all of that. They're actually now managing and integrating with these other vendors' platforms. Cam, any other points on this view?
Yeah, I was going to say that ecosystem and that I love Linux bit is sort of widely extended into the whole ecosystem of the applications and databases that are out there. So you don't see that they're just SQL Server anymore. They're Postgres, they're MySQL, they're the Cosmos, which can speak to MongoDB and all these sorts of things. So they know that they need to make that rich ecosystem to entice people in. And I think they're sort of not closing their doors like they previously had done. And all that sort of functionality and all that integration in time will make it into these sorts of control planes that they're developing around things like Arc.
So one of the things I'm thinking is, from the business point of view, the role of the IT manager is changing significantly into being someone who isn't going to, isn't just there to go in to open the door to the server room every day, check there's no red lights on, check the backups have happened and all of that. So that, are we seeing the role of IT managers that we're dealing with changing significantly?
There was a great explanation. I was on a session. It was a Commvault session, and there was a gentleman there from a university, and I really apologise to him. I can't remember which university it was, but I will see if I can find it and get Megan to put it in the show notes. And he said the role of a CIO, because the previous point he had made is as a CIO for a university, CIO for a city. Basically, he has accommodation, he has restaurants, he has entertainment venues, he has classrooms. He is responsible for this city, basically. But he described his role as a maestro. It isn't there being the person that knows all, that knows everything, that is connected with everything, but he is the person that harmoniously stands at the front and makes sure it all happens, where he says, partner, you're doing this, team, you're doing this, where are we with that? And it is his role to be the ultimate maestro in bringing all these things together. And I loved that explanation.
Yeah.
I was going to say I concur with that, because the whole role is now as IT manager is you're a conductor, and you're bringing the orchestra together and making sure that everyone's playing the right tune in the right way, without those sorts of pregnant pauses or the wrong notes type things. It's a very important job, and I don't think it just sits in one area anymore. Like I manage servers or I manage storage. It's that whole overall wide picture that you need to take now. So it's kind of a more embracing role, shall we say, and more. You do have to have that generalist skill to know a little bit about a lot. And the way I used to describe it when I've been in management roles is I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm not enough to sort of do it all by myself, kind of thing. And I think you need to know enough to be curious as well about what's going on and to challenge and not to accept the status quo. So indeed, that's a sort of IT manager role now. You're sort of a manager, you're an architect, you're a sort of overseer of vision. There's all these sorts of other bits and pieces which are now part and parcel of the role, and that role has changed over time.
And I think the role, you don't have to be an expert in everything. I think the role that partners play in organizations is changing significantly. And you will have, as you're saying, you will orchestrate a number of different partners within your organization. But those partners are the people you go to for the in-depth knowledge. That's where you come across people like Oli, who's got that kind of a really deep understanding of Microsoft and where it's come from and the current technologies. You can't afford to employ people like that within most IT departments, and yet you need their knowledge.
I think one of the examples, and Ollie, I think your journey at Computerworld is clear to that, but also a sign of where the industry's gone. is you joined Computerworld as the Microsoft expert. And equally, I think I was probably the VMware expert.
You know what? I knew at the time I had something written on my business card. I couldn't possibly be. You can't possibly be an expert in everything Microsoft possibly does. So yeah.
I think back when you joined, I think it was probably more achievable than it is today.
Sure.
Even at the periphery, SQL and those kind of subjects, dynamics and stuff like that, it was never there. But you could have a good understanding of the whole portfolio. But I can't remember Azure. What is the count of the number of services that are now in Azure? Is it 300 and something, 500 and something services
It's a
now
lot.
sit in Azure? You can't even be an Azure expert if we're honest with things. People need to specialize, and I think Ollie, naturally, you've gone to that management security side of Microsoft 365, while still knowing the front end and having a good awareness as what some stuff that's going on Azure. But you've really kind of honed those skills into that 365 management piece, really, haven't you?
That's right. So yeah, things that I'm hoping for in 2023 really are going to be around things like Azure AD Connect. So that's now morphing into a thing called Cloud Sync. So Kam, I think you found actually the outright statement from the program manager saying, actually, we do plan to replace Azure AD Connect with the Cloud Sync option, which is a much lighter weight agent. You can actually have more than one agent as well for high availability. And it supports a few more different scenarios, such as disconnected scenarios. So let's say you're taking over a business that's got its own AD, it's got its own 365. Very often, you don't want to have to actually link up the 365. You don't want to actually have to link up the networks and the Active Directories. Maybe they're a bit out of shape. Maybe you actually want to get rid of that Active Directory for the smaller company. So that new Cloud Sync option lets you have disconnected synchronizations up from different networks.
We seem to be hearing about this more often, Ollie. I don't know if people are just coming to us now and they weren't before, or whether it's more mid-market businesses are starting to merge and acquire and stuff like that. It's obviously always happened. I've never seen it as much really in the mid-market place, and you've had to do a number of kind of mergers, or is, and maybe it'd be interesting in your opinion on it, is it just the fact that these businesses have been working well enough with different environments after a merger has happened, and now they're going, look, now is the time that we need to sort this out and get it all brought in together?
There's a couple of different reasons why people merge. So some companies just want to collect smaller little companies and they just run them as autonomous things, and they might then get rid of them at some point in the future. And there's other companies that will bring businesses together because there's that synergy and they want to sort of bring them together. And it's that latter class who are going to want to be integrating their ADs and things like that. So before 365, it's actually somewhat easier. You can link things up. Now you've got two things to link up. You've got 365 tenants and you've got your on-prem AD. And increasingly, we're seeing people not bother with the AD bit of it and just wanting to get the 365s all linked together, primarily so people can see each other in Teams, they can see each other's calendars, and they can start collaborating with them.
I think Ollie and I have been talking to an organisation probably over the last 10 years about merging their three domain controllers, and we finally got around to doing that project more recently, and it was just so much easier because we were just moving all of those into through AD Connect. I don't know if I'm using the right technology, the right words here, but we were able to merge them all into a cloud-based directory rather than actually having to take those three environments and fit them all together.
Yeah, totally.
So Ollie, in the world of Intune, I mean, obviously you're on a daily basis looking into projects for customers and architecting, a bit of blue sky thinking. Is there anything that you would really like to see come into Intune? Any gaps that you think that maybe are in the product that you really hope will be improved at some point in the future?
I think I always say that it's possible to bring in some group policies. So if you look at what you have in AD, you have loads and loads of group policies that are very, very granular. So you get a lot of control. You look at the settings you have in Intune, and it isn't so many. So there's not so many settings, but they're much better targeted at what people want to do. So you've got a tick box or a few set of tick boxes in reality to enroll devices into BitLocker and encrypt them and put the keys up there. I think it would be really nice to have an easier way to bring in group policies and those old traditional things, maybe for third-party applications as well. You're importing an ADMX file. I think that process could be made a little bit easier, and some of the UI changes. But there's a lot of functionality in Intune already. I'm not dissing the product.
No, you wouldn't dare. You've got your Intune t-shirt on, I'm sure. I think it's a very capable product, and I like to dabble with technologies. I've been having a bit of a play with it recently because I seem to be having so many conversations about it. The techie in me then goes, actually, I want to play with it a little bit. And I think the real challenge is knowing what recipe is right for you, because Intune in it has got a ton of ingredients, and you've got to try and build the cake that works for your organization, for the want of a better analogy kind of thing. And I wonder where the future for something like that goes, whether it is the fact that there are suggested templates bringing together things based upon your industry, or whether we could go completely out there. Cam's already mentioned Chat GPT, but maybe you could go into Intune, you could talk to it, you could describe what the desktop needs to look and feel like and be secured like, and then it comes up with a list of suggested ingredients to create the right mix for you. I think there's certainly a lot of potential there to help improve that administrator experience.
Yeah, I think a set of sort of templates that work well, so some sort of tried and trusted sort of templates and default settings might be a really good thing for sort of, I don't know how you carve it up really, as to whether you do small business, medium and large. That's probably not the best way of carving it, but there will be a way of having some sensible defaults, I think, rather than just a complete blank canvas, which is what you get today.
I do think there is a good option for us to create a set of cookbooks based on different things in Microsoft 365. And often I thought about this when we're talking about Teams and the many applications that are available inside Teams and when they should be used and how they should be integrated and things like that, really.
Yeah.
So Anthony, what are you seeing from a Microsoft 365 perspective, or for 2023? What do you want to see? What's coming?
I think if we go back in history, if we go back to the beginning of the whole lockdown and COVID and stuff like that, Teams was well behind the curve compared with products like Zoom. And now, if we look at it now, it's so much more advanced than Zoom ever was. And it's those things that have been added into the functionality that people haven't had a chance to take advantage of yet. I'm starting to do meetings with people from Microsoft and some of the MVPs who have access to the mesh avatars, and starting to see the real benefits of those. But what I think we need to do is to start thinking about how we're using these new technologies and what advantage they're bringing to our businesses. Teams rooms. I was going to say we are seeing more and more hybrid meetings. I've been involved in 3 or 4 hybrid meetings, in this week alone, where I've got a kind of group of people in a room and several other people delivering remotely. So we need to look at Teams rooms and see what advantages we can get from those. I think the camera technologies are changing a lot in that area. Microsoft are doing a lot of work on kind of using AI and IntelliFrame, as they call it, to start bringing those images together from individual cameras and groups of people into conferences, so that we can have a kind of a unified approach and equality between people who are remote and are actually in the room. And a lot of those technologies, I think, are going to bring real benefits to people once we work out exactly how to implement them. I'm really excited for what is being called Teams Premium, the premium license, which is adding a lot of functionality. Now, I know there's a lot of debate as to whether Microsoft really should be charging an extra $10 per user to add this additional functionality, especially as there are some killer things in there. But I think there's talk of it actually, that functionality being dropped into the standard license at some point. But there's a lot of security stuff in there. There's a lot of the ability to watermark meetings and things like that, just to stop people being able to take snapshots and reutilizing the content that you've got within those. The meeting summary stuff, I think, is fascinating. That's going to use AI to listen to the meeting and to be able to pick out the salient points from that meeting and turn them into a list of actions. I also think we'll see different form factors, and we need different form factors for the cameras. I think a lot of people who've early days of implemented Teams rooms, like we have at Computer World, are getting that kind of down the bowling alley type view of people. And we're going to want to start looking at 360 cameras that sit in the middle of a room and can break individual people into different individual data streams and work with those. So yeah, I'm excited for this. I think there's a lot of work to do, but back to my original point was, it's really important for IT managers to go back and look at the functionality they've got already available to them and start to use that in more detail. The other thing I see is, I talk to a lot of people and say, do you use Microsoft Teams? And when they say yes, when you dig into it, what they actually mean is that they're using it for interactive meetings and they're using it for chat. However, that's like probably 10 to 15% of the functionality available in Teams. When you start to enter that conundrum, which is using Teams within Microsoft Teams, which I wish they would just rename one of those two things, then it would then you kind of go, how are you using actual teams, departmental teams, and project-based teams within your organization to help you improve communication, collaboration, to help you file all of the relevant information into the right place, and make you make it a more efficient environment to work in. Then loads of people aren't doing that. Loads of people have got a chat hanging over here with a couple of people in to do with a particular project, but the documents are all held in each other's OneDrives, and they're not getting that real advantage of the what I call the automatic filing system, which is Teams, which will allow you to associate a meeting with a Teams channel, and meaning that all the details from the meeting, all the files are there, etc., and having the appropriate kind of SharePoint storage area implemented properly with, yet again, some good rules and regulations that you use as an organization. So yeah, I'm excited for what Teams has got to bring to organizations, but yet again, the role of the IT manager is migrating, and it needs to be the IT manager who's looking at that functionality alongside their peers in the rest of the organization to really get the benefits from what Teams can bring to an organization.
I think it's certainly some good points there, and I think hybrid meetings are a challenge for lots of people. I think I'm looking forward to seeing the front row technology is front row, isn't it, Anthony?
Yes,
I'm looking to see that come publicly available again. I think it's currently sat at public preview at the moment. I'm looking for it to go into sort of that production phase. It would be good if you could kind of set a Teams room up to be front row all the time rather than having to go and mess around with the console and go and do it. And it does work really well with those 21:9 screens, is it, rather than 16:9, the really wide aspect ratio screens sat quite down low on the table. I think you also made a good point around kind of utilizing more Microsoft Teams, and Ollie, I can't, me and you had a conversation a good few months ago, and you had a gut feeling based upon some evidence that there was going to be SharePoint integration into Windows coming, and this just seemed to make perfect sense, that you'd be able to browse SharePoint repositories, and we know we can do it with the OneDrive sync and stuff like that, but it's not a native kind of experience, is it? Have you got any more reflection on that? I don't know if you muted, Ollie. I can't see.
Yeah, I'm muted. Always got to be one, isn't there?
Exactly.
No, the reason that I said that actually was somebody online had spotted a job advert for a program manager in the Windows team for actually rewriting Explorer and embedding some of those SharePoint functionalities in it. And as you said, it makes complete sense. So you look at Office, when you go file open in Office, and it's a little bit of a mess, if I say so myself, in terms of the different user interfaces you get. You can dive into Explorer, so you can double click and actually get an Explorer window up, and that gives you a full window. You can get a web view that's actually SharePoint, or you can get a sort of Word presenting that SharePoint view. So there's actually 3 different file open experiences you have in there, and it would make a lot more sense if Explorer just natively could dive into SharePoint repositories rather than having to use the OneDrive sync client to then put a stub into somewhere on the local disk. It'd just be nicer if it was natively there.
Nice for native. It's more of that cloud operating system then, isn't it? If Microsoft are using Teams and SharePoint to do that, I was just having a look. You're probably going to tell me, Ollie, now that this happened a year ago or something like that. But I run Windows 11 here. Why wouldn't I? I've used every Windows desktop operating system as soon as it came out, including Vista and ME, and I liked both of those, and that makes me an awful person, I believe. But I've noticed I've now got tabs in Explorer. So at the top, you can now have one window open with multiple tabs in it. So I did just do a quick right-click, add network location, just to see if SharePoint is snuck in there, and I'd not noticed it. But no, it still says WebDAV, FTP, network location, rather than SharePoint. And that would probably be the logical place. If it had to be that manual, it would be nice to just pick it up.
So they've clearly done a lot of work on Explorer. So there's a lot of UI changes that have come in Windows 11, and it's a bit disconcerting the first time you want to rename a file and you can't find the rename button or whatever, and it's changed.
Like more options now or something, haven't you? I think.
Oh, there's an icon at the top as well. So you've got those icons there. Once you know what that is and find where it is, it's quite nice. But I'd like to see a bit more integration with some of the cloud products, such as OneDrive.
So let's come back round and see what else that you've got. I mean, if this might be core to what you're doing, or it might just be some wider hopes and desires of the IT industry and where it's going, really. So Kam, let's come back to you from that, from the infrastructure, hybrid, cloud perspective, or wherever you want to take us.
Yeah, I think from an infrastructure point of view, is trying to simplify and allow the more generalist to manage the environment rather than the specialist. So I think sort of continuation on that journey is where I'd like to see things going. Certainly, if you look at things like storage or even managing server compute now compared to where it was before, you can see how much more simple it is to carry out the day-to-day operations. So sort of continuing in that direction and benefiting and enhancing by building in. It's quite a loose term, this sort of AI, ML type stuff, but all that sort of functionality in terms of those management tools to make that your life easier from a day-to-day administration point of view, but also trying to make it sort of the language that you're using in your own data center and in a cloud very similar in terms of the vocabulary or understanding. It's kind of probably where I would like to see things going in 2023. So that this whole situation now where you have a big skills gap and not enough people to fulfill all the roles becomes less pressing if you have a generic set of skills that sort of can lend itself to that infrastructure space now. So certainly seeing things go in that direction and helping, it would be a good thing. I see it coming and evolving. It'd be interesting for me now to see what the next iteration, for example, with Dell in terms of their server fleet when it comes out, because I think there's a 16th generation announcement coming out very soon where they're really taking that sort of traditional type compute stuff or storage offerings in the future this year in 2023.
I think that's a good point, and it's quite interesting to see what is going on in the industry actually. And one of the things that I've been reflecting on is networking, and we had this discussion in the office the other day. Networking has always been that very specialist subject that you need to have the skill set, you need to know what to do on the command line to be able to configure it right. And it appears that the whole of the network industry has really embraced the GUI, and it's embraced intelligent AI that is able to help you with that management and that orchestration. Whilst other areas that have been a bit more point and click in the past, like managing your infrastructure, are now going more down the infrastructure as code route and things like that. So I do wonder if there is more abstraction layers that could be coming out that allow things like AI and ease of management to be simplified, layered on top of things like Azure and your other platforms. And there was fantastic examples back in the VMware days. I'm trying to remember off the back of my head around these kind of interfaces that really created self-service portals and things like that were quite easy to consume, not the vCloud Director kind of thing. So no, I completely agree with that, Kam. I don't know if you're seeing anything around that abstraction layer around ease of management rather than the abstraction layer around infrastructure as code.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the thing you mentioned about networking is quite germane, because it used to be that you have networking equipment in your data center, you walk up with a cable, you plug it in the back of a switch, you configure it, away you go. That's totally not the way you do it now. You have a centralized cloud controller which says, I'm aware of your device, I'll go and build it. So we're seeing a lot more of that, and you can define cookie cutter configurations that it just downloads to the device. So you don't even need that sort of IT specialist on site now to go and physically get it operational. And I think it's a step in the right direction to sort of, almost take the wizard's cape away from the sort of art of networking or anything like that and make it a bit more easy to understand and consume and visualize, shall we say, because I think it's important to have that sort of that familiarity, shall we say, in terms of having a rough idea of what you want to do, maybe not having that deep down technical knowledge, but knowing that through the sort of abstraction of the GUI tools and stuff that allows you to sort of fulfill that function.
Definitely. Oli, on to you then. Anything else that you want to, your hopes and desires for things you might see in 2023?
Yeah, I don't know. First of all, I wanted to pick up something that actually all three of you other guys have said on the call about AI. I just wanted to make the point that what we regard as AI today changes through time. So you look at what you might have been calling AI 20 years ago. You might have been saying a Google search is AI. Now nobody would say that's AI. It's just something that computers do. So maybe AI is things that computers are getting to do better and aren't actually doing perfectly. And once computers do them well, we just think that's what computers do. But yeah, in terms of things for 2023, I think I'd encourage people just to pay attention to the basics. Just go and look at some of the things you've done in 365 already. Are you sharing files unauthenticated to every user who wants it? Maybe that needs tightening up. Maybe some of the things that were appropriate when you first set up Teams, maybe things have changed in the last 2 years, certainly. But that's for us.
There's certainly a lot that is changing, and certainly I know Megan with the Adopt 365 platform is constantly having to look at that and see the features that have been released and dropped into it. So if you haven't done that review, it's worth doing it. And the 365 roadmap is a good place to keep an eye on those things, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, looking at stuff that is coming new, but also things that you've implemented some time ago that maybe changed. And I'll also encourage people to look at, keep looking when you've got a hybrid environment. Do you still need that VPN? Do you still need that on-prem AD? That's a question I always ask when people are moving, doing certainly company mergers and things like that. Does that company still need its AD? And does it really need it? Or are you just doing that because it's the way it's always been done?
I suppose that's where things like zero trust controllers and stuff like that come in, which Cam, I know that you've got some experience of with things like Zscaler and stuff like that, as well as maybe a more modern way. Don't need the VPN, but you still need a centralized management plane or something like that.
Yeah, and if it's a web app, it can even be things like a zero app proxy. So maybe you could serve that web app out using an app proxy and get rid of the need for a VPN if that's the last of the apps that you need, or the Zscaler approach, which is also good.
Yeah, like what you said about AI there, Ollie, as someone that was very nearly a SQL DBA, I have looked at lots of the technologies that claim to be using AI, thinking, well, that's just a really good SQL statement that someone's written that's giving you some really good information. What AI is in it, kind of thing. I don't know. There's much learning going on. It is just the learning is in the eye of the database administrator that is finding ways to give you information you've not had access to before. But clearly, there is true AI powered platforms out there as well. Sorry, Cam, I interrupted you there. What was your point?
No, yeah, I was going to say, for me, AI is a bit like watching a child grow. Actually, it's kind of gone through that infancy bit. It's starting to get a bit more mature, starting to grow up and starting to work out things for itself now without that direct, hand-holding type scenario. And that's only going to continue, I think, going forward. And really, I think the question is more about how responsible it becomes in terms of what it's doing, because obviously this is the biggest worry now, I think, at the moment in terms of the jurisdiction of the guardrails of what you're doing with it. But the other point in terms of the zero trust networking, I think that is going to be the way of working now. This whole concept of VPNs is starting to, I think it's going to start changing soon. Whether it's in 23 or beyond, I don't know. But certainly the per app VPN is becoming more popular now than this whole concept of I log into a bricks and mortar type building, then I get access to my resources. And it's kind of that hybrid journey in terms of how we as individuals now work. We don't often go into the office to work anymore. So that sort of whole thought process of how the way I access my application catalog is changing. And things like the zero trust networking are very important, because you don't want to just open the doors and say, everyone come in and use my applications without the control. And that sort of enforces that sort of management and control capability, shall we say, without the user even not knowing it's happening.
I think it's quite zero trust networking is a concept I think that's been around for a while. Again, I think it's one of those ones that people go, oh God, that sounds very complicated. How would I ever get to something like that? And I think if you are an enterprise, you do require things like Zscalers and those kind of platforms. But I think to your average mid-sized business, zero trust networking doesn't have to be that complicated. And I'm fully welcome someone to come back to this statement I'm just about to make and say, Barry, you've not got that right. However, I think if in your medium-sized business, you treat your network where your users are connected to the network as an internet connection, as it is at home, as it is in the coffee shop, and then inside Microsoft 365, and I'm going to pick all the wrong technologies, which Ollie, you're going to then correct me upon, you're going to use things like conditional access or app policies to be able to say you could only access this from a managed device, and that managed device is then managed by something like Intune, where you're keeping on top of it. In my mind, that is the zero trust that a mid-sized organization needs. I don't know. First, Ollie, how many of those technologies did I get wrong? What have I missed out?
Yeah, it's conditional access, so it's exactly what you said. So yeah, basically gating access to certain resources based on whether a device is compliant is a really good thing. But you can actually extend that, and you can use a thing called app enforced restrictions, which works both with SharePoint and with Exchange Online, that lets you actually give different levels of access to different data. So your very, very secure HR stuff, you might want to say this is only going to be available from corporate devices I own that are managed and are compliant with the policy, full stop. Your book club, SharePoint or team thing, you might say actually anyone can access that from any device and we don't care too much about it. And then there's a sort of midpoint where you can say you can access this from untrusted devices, but you're only going to get a web view. You can edit stuff, but you can't save the document onto the device and you can't print it. So there's some good flexible options that you just can't do with on-prem software.
And Cam, is there anything major that I've missed there from a mid-market zero trust networking? Is that good enough, or is it a good starting point? Should we say?
I would say, in the words of the great Ali G, you've got to keep it real, and you've got to be realistic as well, because things like Zscaler or Zscaler, depending on how you say it, they're great tools, but they also come with a cost. And some of the basic things that you can do to enforce the zero trust networking are things that just been mentioned now. You know, we're all mostly working with 365 and things around that sort of ecosystem. So just doing those simple things, but in the right way, are actually enforcing that level of zero trust. They're not just allowing everyone to sort of come and do whatever they want and making it like the Wild West. So I think, you know, it's being realistic as well in terms of that space as well. You know, with a view to, if you wanted to extend it to the next level, you could with a number of zero trust network vendors, shall we say. But sort of at least start that journey now rather than just not doing anything and ignoring that situation that currently exists.
And I think with your infrastructure, people are generally looking at SaaS applications. So look if you can control the access to them with single sign-on with Microsoft 365. Your remaining legacy applications, maybe get them up to Azure and use the security features that are in Azure to be able to segment them so there's a less of attack area and things like that. So I think these things are generally attainable for people that want to go on the journey, and I like your Ali G quote there, Cam, and we've got to just break this down, keep it simple. Let's do the basics. You can always then layer on additional things in the future if you need to.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
Anthony,
I think I was going to say, just to add to that, you know, hackers and anyone who's trying to get into your data just love overcomplicated scenarios. So I'm back to my, you know, getting my Captain Chaos hat on. When you're designing your infrastructure and your data architecture, you know, and making the rules about where you're going to store things and how you're going to manage them, just keep it as simple as possible, and then overlay the security on top of that simplicity. Because you know, once you kind of get organic growth, you get people deciding where they're going to, how they're going to use systems, and where they're going to store things. All of a sudden, you've made it. It makes it an absolute nightmare for getting the security and compliance sorted within your environment. So just keep it as simple as you can, and set those hard rules for people and educate people on what the rules are and how things should be done. And then use the tools within Microsoft 365, so around the compliance, so your information protection stuff, your data loss prevention pieces, to police those rules for you. You know, I seem to be spending my whole life at the moment, you know, working with organizations who've got a Teams environment with its associated SharePoint environment that has just run out of control. And it's very difficult. You can't fix that problem by overlaying the security on it, because the architecture's all over the place. So yeah, that's where, you know, Barry mentioned Orchestra as a tool earlier. That's a good way just to start to bring that back under control, to make sure that it is only people who should be creating new teams who can create those, that there are rules about, you know, how many owners a team has to have as a minimum, that where the data will be stored for that team, etc. So yeah, just to reinforce that, it's just so important that you don't just bung your environment out there and let people do what they want to it and make up their own ways of doing things. You need some standards within the organization. I'm trying to think what else I was going to add on at this point. I think, probably made the point enough times already, but Microsoft 365 has so much potential to improve the productivity within your organization. I think of simple things that have come along recently, like the whiteboarding functionality. The fact that we can walk into a meeting room now and kick off a whiteboard with the people around us, and then turn that into a Teams meeting and add remote users and share that experience with them, just brings lots of benefits to lots of organizations who, when I show that functionality to people and they haven't seen it before, they kind of go, oh, hang on a minute, that will make a big difference if we can do that on one whiteboard shared with people inside the organization, outside the organization. That can make some real benefits. Power Automate and Power Apps, these are things that have been there for a long time, but don't be scared of these things. They're very simple to set up some Power Apps, and we did a really good live training session within our Adopt 365 product talking about just creating a very simple Power Automate. Barry, who, I know he's clever at these things, but he wrote a Power App for us for our Define Tomorrow event for scanning badges. So lots of functionalities that we would probably not have brought together if it wasn't for the fact that there's that platform there. So do look at these things and look at how you can drive some benefits into your organization. And I was just thinking back, what's the main difference between an IT manager now as to what it was in the past? And it is going to be that interaction, that requirement for interaction with different people within your organization. The IT manager was kind of almost sat in the corner in the old days, a necessary evil running some IT that churned out some finance figures. Now that IT manager has got to be someone who can go and talk to the user departments, can go and talk to the different bits of the organization, and understand their requirements, and got that ability to put himself in their shoes and see how they can apply that technology to improve the efficiency of the organization. So yeah.
Definitely. So as we come to wrap up the podcast, a couple of things for me. First of all, thank you to everyone that is listening. Please make sure that you're subscribed, like, and give it a comment. We really like to hear from those that are listening. You don't want to miss out on future podcasts. Just a reminder to you, the Define Tomorrow podcast is brought to you by the team here at Computer World. We are a Microsoft specialist. We focus on Microsoft 365, Microsoft Azure, security, and everything in between. So if we can help you with a challenge that you're having, you want to get more out of Microsoft 365, we're a CSP partner, so we can provide you great value licensing with added benefits such as our Adopt 365 platform, as well as doing things like Azure optimization. So finally, to wrap this up, we wanted to just give our listeners a taste of where you can go to find out more information, to be best prepared as you go out throughout the year. And the one thing that I wanted to just pinpoint everyone to first was our Define Tomorrow virtual conference that we're bringing to you on the 23rd of February. So we held an in-person event in Bristol at the end of November. Fantastic speakers from Microsoft, from Computer World, and our partners. And we have all the content available from that event coming to you for one day only on the 23rd of February with some fantastic sessions. If you did attend, you'll be able to see the sessions that maybe you missed when you were going between the different stages. If you didn't attend, this is a fantastic way for you to be able to get comfy, sit at your desk, and be able to watch the content that matters to you. So head over to definetomorrow.co.uk. There's a banner at top that you can click to register for that event and pick which sessions matter to you. So let's do a final around the room. Cam, are there any conferences that you recommend, any other resources that you recommend, and any final kind of thoughts you wanted to share with our audience?
Yeah, I think going over the theme here around the Microsoft piece, don't ignore that Microsoft have a wealth of information on their Learn website in terms of the whole portfolio of Microsoft stuff around Azure or even 365. And it's brilliant content, really well organized, and it's easy to understand. So you should really acquaint yourself with that to get more familiar with the Microsoft stack. And then, so the other things probably to look out for, and I'm sure there'll be a common theme. Certainly, I'm looking forward to MS Ignite, Microsoft Ignite. I wish there'd been a local event in the UK, but there hasn't. But the US event, you can subscribe and then basically download and watch at your leisure. So certainly those are things I'm looking forward to. And then there are the usual conferences from the infrastructure vendors like VMware and Dell, which I'm quite curious to see what they all plan to do in 2023.
Fantastic, thank you. And Ollie, the same question to you.
Absolutely. I think Cam's already stolen the one that I would have put first and foremost, which is the Ignite conference. That's got to be the sort of flagship one. But full credit for pointing out Learn as well. Learn.microsoft.com is a really good platform for learning. But yeah, Ignite has been mid-November. A big conference in the USA. Previously, pre-COVID, they would go on tour. So they would have localized events. So you'd have Ignite on tour in the Excel Centre in London. There's one in Birmingham as well. But I really look forward to those coming back. They're really, really good. So it's really a lot of the sessions that are run over in the States. They used to run over in the UK with potentially different speakers, but that was good. But you can always watch the videos of the US event, which is really worth doing. There's a couple of localized conferences. There's the South Coast Summit, which I think, Anthony, I'm not sure if you've been there. I've not managed to make that one. That's a good one. And
No.
You haven't? Okay, cool. And the Evolve conference hasn't returned yet. So that was one that happened at the Motorcycle Museum up somewhere near Birmingham. That was always a good day, and it's not returned since COVID. So fingers crossed. Going to keep an eye out for that one.
Fantastic. Fantastic resources there. Thank you, Ollie. Anthony, finally to you.
So I think Ollie's taken most of mine, but definitely Ignite. Love to get back out on Ignite. The Commsverse is one that we've spoken at in the past and presented at in the past, and that's maturing into a really good conference with some really good speakers there. That takes place at Mercedes World, yeah, really get a lot from that. As someone who's come from a Microsoft background, I've still not found anything from the VMware background. I've still not found anything to replace VMworld for my overseas trip each year. I just think, going to a different country to a conference is a totally different experience, and it's a great opportunity to spend some time with your colleagues and get some really good quality stuff. So I've got to say I'm over virtual conferences now. It's just I really need to get back and rub shoulders with some people and have some conversations with people. So that's it. It comes with Ignite, and anything that's going on in Barcelona would be good.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, thank you there, Ollie. Thank you there, Anthony. So really good resources there. Anthony already shared one of mine. That's VMworld, or obviously now rebranded as VMware Explore. I still find that a really useful conference. Obviously, if you're focused on the VMware technology portfolio, it's a must-attend event. However, there was Microsoft keynotes there. I learned more about Azure Arc and Azure Stack HCI at VMware Explore than I have done at any other conference, which is quite ironic because Microsoft wouldn't have even been invited there a few years ago when we were in the middle of the hypervisor battle. So look at the conferences and maybe look to see actually how they have matured. Microsoft Ignite obviously is one that we all look forward to, and I'm with you all. Let's hope that goes back on tour in the true fashion that it used to do, and we can get people back together. There are other conferences. So there's ISE happening. I believe it's at the end of this month or next month, which is it the Integrated Systems Europe conference, which is a lot about AV technology. But if you're into Microsoft Teams rooms and calling and things like that, there's some fantastic technologies available at those conferences. Want to remind people to check out definetomorrow.co.uk. The team here regularly write articles. Ollie did a fantastic article recently with some good thoughts and considerations that you'll find over at definetomorrow.co.uk. You can remember to register for our event there. Also check out computerworld.co.uk/events, and you'll see all of the fantastic events that we run on a regular basis. So to Cam, Ollie, and Anthony, I'd like to thank you for joining me today. Really enjoyed our conversation. Hopefully that you that have been listening have also enjoyed. Remember to put a comment below, and remember to subscribe to see the next episode, whether that's on YouTube or your favorite podcast application. But thank you for listening. We look forward to speaking to you on the next one.